My name is Norman Whitten Blye, and this is my life. I was born right after the end of World War I, December 27th, 1918. I believe I'm the only person living who was born in a house on Main Street in Old Bellevue after the end of World War I. And then I moved over to Lakeside Avenue in Seattle near the ferry dock, and that's where I learned to row a boat, paddle a canoe, and sail. I was never a big kid, so I wasn't big enough to play football and basketball, but I got interested in weightlifting, bodybuilding, and hand balancing. I never had a friend quite as close as Merle. I could confide in him, and I could tell him things that I wouldn't tell my own brother or sister or anybody. And weekends, my brother-in-law and my sister would drive clear to Bellevue to take us kids, her younger brothers and sisters, for a ride in the country. And he said, "Would you like to take a ride along the lake and learn to drive?" And I said, "I sure would." I had a good job in trucking, and I was making good money, so I decided to stay in trucking. And when I was going to school, I drove truck, and I ended up being the route foreman for the company because I memorized all the routes in Seattle. So he introduced me to his wife, and he said, "This is Norm Blye. He's my dispatcher, and he's the one that knows Seattle." And she says, "Oh, well, I work for Stetson Ross. What's our address?" I said, 3210 First Avenue South. She looked at me and said, "Wow, you do know the city." I can still remember that address at 88 years old. So we took 2 or 3 runs, and finally I was a big show-off and a gymnast, I thought. So I took a big run, and I went faster than anybody. And I slid down that dock, and there was a big coil of rope that they used to tie the ferry. I hit that pile of rope, and I went up on one runner. I sailed off that 10-foot dock into 20 feet of water in January. So I still have those weights in my basement. I still have a workout gym there, and those weights are heavier now than they ever were. So I'm so thankful that I still am healthy, and I could do these things so many years. Now I'm getting lazy, and I'm 88, so I'm not playing golf and I'm not sailing, but I still wish I had a sailboat. I'd like to do that. And I worked with him until I retired. Well, he needed me in Seattle as manager. So when I was 65, he said, "You're too young to retire. You're a weightlifter and a strongman." He said, "Why don't you keep on working with me?" And I said, "Well, Bosco, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll work 3 days a week, and I'll keep my company car. I will keep my insurance, and you can just pay me what I would, what the Social Security will allow me to make. And besides that, I like your condo on Maui, and I want you to let me use it for 2 weeks every spring in May, and I want to have another vacation in the fall." And he said, "Oh, that'd be great." So I stayed on, and I worked until I was 70, and I played a lot of golf, and I worked 3 days a week, and I had 4-day weekends. Well, we met March 11th. I remember the date because it was one of my best friend's birthday, and we dated until September, and that's when I proposed. And we were married at Thanksgiving time, November 28th in 1943. So we now have been married 63 years. And finally, my wife became pregnant, and we bought a home, as I told you, and moved out to Rainier Beach on top of the hill to a beautiful place with a view and the mountains and the lake. And so she was born in 47, and we named her Christine Ione. Ione was my mother's name. And my mother was very flattered that she had a granddaughter named after her. And then 2.5 years later, my wife became pregnant again, and I thought, oh, I'd sure love to have a son. And so I crossed my fingers for 9 months. And finally, May 15th, 1950, my son was born, and his birthday was real easy because it was all fives. He was born 5/15/50. I fell in love with sailing, and of course I'd always loved Lake Washington. I tell people that's where I learned to swim and dive and canoe and row a boat and sail and water ski. And then I got interested in golf during the war, and I played golf from the time I was in my 20s till in my 80s, mid-80s. I'm so pleased that my family stayed in Seattle all those years when I was growing up. And then my son and daughter have stayed in Seattle, and all my relatives, my nieces and nephews, live here. And I'm just so glad that they didn't move to another part of the United States. It's just the best place in the world for scenery and climate. And I thank my lucky stars every day that I live here. I'd like to be remembered as a pleasant person. I have lots of friends. I had a wonderful life and a wonderful time.